slammed the iron gate shut inches from Victoria. Sterling Hayes's nose, the HOA president's face, went from white to purple in seconds. "How dare you slam that gate in my face?" she shrieked, her diamond-covered fingers rattling the metal bars like a caged animal. I stood inside, heart racing, but keeping my cool, deep breath. Marcus. By the way, comment below where you're watching from this story. Gets absolutely insane. This was it. After 6 months of her tyranny, I'd had enough. And this woman had no idea she'd just picked a fight with her new landlord. Let me back up. 6 months. When I moved to Willowbrook Heights, I thought I was finally achieving the American dream after 15 years of building my logistics company, from nothing, working 18-hour days and sleeping in my office more times than I could count. I'd finally made it. The house was beautiful. $1 million property I'd bought with cash, no mortgage, no loans, just the sweet satisfaction of knowing I'd earned every square foot of it. The neighborhood looked perfect too, with its manicured lawns and white picket fences. What I didn't know was that I'd just entered the kingdom of Victoria Sterling Hayes, and in her kingdom there was only one law, hers. The problem started immediately. Day one, I got a violation notice for my moving truck being parked incorrectly in my own driveway. Day 3, another notice because my grass was 1 in tall instead of the regulation. 2 in HOA logic is absolute. The notice read as if measuring grass with a ruler was a normal Saturday activity. I wasn't the only target. My neighbor to the left, an elderly veteran named George, got fined for having his American flag at the wrong angle. The young couple to my right received a violation because their baby stroller was visible from the street for more than 30 minutes. I started keeping a journal of all these infractions, thinking maybe I was going crazy. But then George knocked on my door one evening with a bottle of whiskey and his own stack of notices. "Son," he said, "I fought in Vietnam, survived corporate downsizing, and raised 3 kids. But this woman might be the enemy I can't defeat." We sat on my porch comparing notes, and that's when I realized Victoria wasn't just a nuisance. She was a tyrant who turned our American dream into a nightmare of measurements and fines. Other neighbors started joining our informal gatherings, each with their own horror stories. We called ourselves the Willow Heights Refugees, and we laughed about it, but the laughter had an edge of desperation. Week 2 brought a fine for my mailbox, being the wrong shade of black, not the wrong color, mind you, the wrong shade. By month 3, I'd accumulated over $2,000 in fines for infractions so ridiculous they'd make a DMV employee laugh, but I kept my cool, paid the fines, and tried to be a good neighbor. After all, I dealt with worse in business. This was just another obstacle to overcome, or so I thought. Everything changed that Saturday morning, 7 a.m. sharp. My doorbell rang like someone was trying to wake the dead. I opened the door to find Victoria standing there with 5 other people, all holding clipboards and wearing matching HOA badges like they were some kind of grass police. Victoria's platinum blonde hair was styled to perfection despite the early hour, and her designer suit probably cost more than most people's cars' inspection time. She announced, already trying to push past me into my house. One of the inspection team members, a nervous-looking man in his 40s, whispered, "Isn't 7 a.m. on a Saturday a bit much?" Victoria shot him a glare that could freeze hell over, and he immediately shut up. "I'm sorry, but you can't enter my home without my permission," I said, politely. Blocking the doorway, Victoria's face twisted into an ugly sneer. "I have reports of illegal business activity being conducted from this residence. As HOA president, I have the authority to investigate." I knew my rights, and I knew she was bluffing. "No, you don't, not without a court order or my consent, which you're not getting." Her face went from red to purple. "I'll fine you $500 a day until you comply," she shrieked.
"That's illegal harassment," I replied.
Calmly, "Please leave my property." That's when she said it. The words that would seal her fate. "People like you don't belong here. This is a respectable neighborhood, not a refuge for whatever trash washed up from wherever you came from." The inspection.
Team looked uncomfortable, shifting their feet and avoiding eye contact. Even they knew she'd crossed the line. But Victoria wasn't done. She tried to push past me, actually putting her hands on my chest to shove me aside. That's when I stepped back.
And closed the gate. Not slammed, despite what she'd claimed. Later, just firmly closed it. The gate swung shut just inches from her face, close enough that she probably felt the breathe. The look of shock on her face was priceless, like someone had just told her that her country club membership had been revoked. For a moment there was complete silence. Then she exploded. "I need police here now. I've been assaulted," she screamed into her phone, her voice so shrill that dogs 3 blocks away probably started barking. A violent neighbor just attacked me, send everyone. I stood there calmly, sipping the coffee I'd brought to the door with me. Watching her performance, the inspection team was already backing away, clearly wanting no part of whatever was about to happen. One woman muttered something about this being why she never volunteered for these things. Victoria continued her theatrical display, claiming I'd tried to crush her with a gate and that she was in fear for her life. 20 minutes later, 2 police cars rolled up, and I couldn't help but notice how the lead officer, Officer David Thompson, looked exhausted before he even got out of the car. This was going to be interesting. Officer Thompson approached with the weary expression of a man who dealt with Victoria Sterling Hayes one too many times. Behind him, a younger officer looked confused, probably wondering why they needed 2 cars for a gate dispute. "Ma'am, what seems to be the problem?" Thompson asked, though his tone suggested he already knew this was going to be ridiculous. Victoria
Immediately launched into her performance, worthy of a daytime soap opera. I slammed the gate in my face. I could have been injured. I could have been killed. This violent man attacked me for no reason. She gestured wildly at me, her diamond rings
catching the morning sunlight like tiny disco balls. I remained calm, taking another sip of my coffee. "Officer Thompson, I simply closed my own gate. I have security cameras that recorded the entire interaction if you'd like to see what actually happened." Victoria's face went pale for a split second before returning to its previous shade of fury. "Read those videos are probably doctored. He's a criminal. He runs illegal businesses from that house." Thompson sighed heavily, the sigh of a man who'd rather be anywhere else on a Saturday morning. "If I had $1 for every time you've called us, Mrs. Sterling. Hayes, I could retire early. Let's look at the footage. Shall we walk to my security monitor?" Victoria trailing behind, still ranting about her
assault and criminal neighbors. The footage was crystal clear, showing Victoria trying to push her way into my house. Me stepping back and the gate closing. Normally it also captured audio, which was particularly damning trash. "Like you ruins our property. Values, I'll have you evicted," her recorded voice screeched. Thompson watched the whole thing, then turned to Victoria with an expression that was part exhaustion, part amusement. The inspection team, who'd been trying to disappear into the background,
started shuffling nervously. One of them, a mousy woman named Janny, actually cleared her throat and said, "Victoria, maybe we should go. This isn't what we signed up for." Another member, still holding his ridiculous clipboard, added, "I've got a golf game at 10. But the real kicker was when old Mr. Peterson, who'd been on the HOA board for 20 years, looked directly at me and mouthed, "I'm sorry." The whole scene was being filmed by at least 6 different neighbors. Now I could see phones pointed at us, from windows, driveways, even from behind bushes. Victoria's empire was crumbling. In real time, broadcast live to the neighborhood group chat. She must have noticed too, because her face went from red to white as she realized this wasn't going to end well for her mom. Closing one's own gate is not assault. What I see here is you attempting to force entry into his home and making what could be construed as discriminatory statements. Victoria lost it completely. Arrest him. I'm the HOA president. My husband built your police station. Thompson's eyebrows raised slightly. Ma'am, your husband's been dead for 5 years and he built a community centre, not the police station, also being HOA president. Doesn't give you the right to trespass or make discriminatory comments. I noticed Victoria's hands trembling slightly at it. The mention of her husband, a crack in her armour that she quickly tried to hide, but the damage was done. The younger officer was trying not to laugh, and I could see my neighbour, Dr. Emily Rodriguez, filming the whole thing from her driveway. That's when Robert Sterling appeared, looking like he just rolled out of bed or hadn't slept at all. Victoria's son was 28, but had the nervous energy of a teenager, caught with a bad report card. "Mom, come on, let's go," he said, trying to pull her away. But as he did, his phone rang. He answered it quickly, turning away from us, but not before I heard him whisper urgently, "I'll pay. I swear, just don't." The voice on the other end was loud enough for those nearby to hear, with a distinctive Russian accent. 2 weeks, or we visit your mother Emily, who was still filming, moved closer, and I heard her mutter, "That sounded like Boris from the deli, but way scarier." Thompson noticed the exchange too, but chose to focus on the matter at hand. "Mrs. Sterling, Hayes, I'm not arresting anyone for closing their own gate. What I'm going to do is file a report about this incident, including your attempted trespassing.
And the discriminatory comments. I suggest you leave Mr. Rivera alone," he turned to me with a slight smile. "Thanks for the burger at your barbecue last week, by the way. Save me one next time, but I'm on duty right now."
Victoria's face was a masterpiece of fury and humiliation. She opened her mouth to protest again, but Robert pulled her away more forcefully. "Mom, now," he insisted, and something in his voice made her stop as they walked away. Victoria turned back.
One last time, her voice dripping with venom. "This isn't over. I'll make your life hell. You have no idea who you're messing with."
I watched them go, then pulled out my phone. "Stan, remember what I told you about buying out competitors without them knowing it's time?" I could feel Officer Thompson looking at me curiously, but I just smiled. "She has no idea what's coming," I said, quietly, more to myself than anyone else. The game had begun, and Victoria Sterling Hayes had just made the biggest mistake of her HOA presidency. She'd turned a neighbor into an enemy, and worse for her, she'd turned a successful businessman into a motivated opponent. As the police cars pulled away and the morning returned to its suburban quiet, I started planning my next move. Victoria wanted to play games, fine, but she was about to learn that in the game of property and power I'd been playing, at a much higher level for much longer than she could imagine. The thing about business is that the best moves are the ones your opponent never sees coming. I'd learned that lesson the hard way, building my logistics company from a one-man operation to a multi-million-dollar enterprise. I once bought out my competitor's entire infrastructure without them knowing, until it was too late. I'd told Stan Morrison, my private investigator, years ago now, it was time to apply that same strategy to my HOA problem. Stan was a former Marine who transitioned into private investigation, and he had a particular hatred for HOA overreach after his own battles with them. When I called him that morning, his response was immediate. "Oh, Victoria Sterling, that woman, this one's on the house." Well, Emily Rodriguez knocked on my door that evening holding a thick folder. "I thought you might want to see these," she said, her usually cheerful face. "Serious, I've been documenting everything for the past year." As she spread the papers on my kitchen table, she told me her story last year. I had a miscarriage, It was devastating for a few weeks. I couldn't bring myself to do anything, including maintain my front yard. A few plants died. Her voice cracked slightly. Victoria fined me $300 for destroying neighborhood aesthetics while I was grieving my baby. That's when I started recording everything. That's when I started the group. Emily continued, her voice stronger now. First, it was just me and Mrs. Patterson. Then the Washingtons joined. Then George, we'd meet at the coffee shop outside the neighborhood, away from Victoria's eyes. We called it the Underground Railroad of Willow Heights. And we weren't entirely joking. We documented everything, shared strategies for dealing with her harassment, and supported each other through the worst of it. Did you know she once fined the Andersons $500 because their daughter's chalk drawings on their own driveway were garish? Their daughter has autism, and those drawings were her therapy. That's the kind of monster we're dealing with. Marcus, the folder contained copies of meeting minutes, illegal fines, discriminatory comments, and a pattern of harassment that would make any lawyer salivate. She's been doing this for years, Emily said. You're just her latest target. 2 days later, Stan called with his initial findings, and even I was shocked. You won't believe this, he said. Excitement clear in his voice. Victoria Sterling Hayes is renting. She doesn't own that mansion she lives in. He paused for dramatic effect. And get this, her son Robert owes money to some very bad people. We're talking Russian mob, crypto gambling debts, the whole 9 yards. The pieces were starting to come together. Victoria's desperate need for control, her constant fines and fees, it all made sense. Now she was broke, maintaining a facade of wealth, while drowning in her son's debts. The HOA money just disappeared again. I remembered her complaining to another neighbor just last week, blaming it on accounting errors. While I was building my case, Victoria was escalating her war against me. She posted on every community forum and local social media group, warning suspicious activity at this address with a photo of my house. But the comments didn't go the way she expected. The only suspicious thing is your 73 unpaid parking tickets. One neighbor wrote, another added, maybe focus on why HOA funds keep disappearing instead of harassing good neighbors. She tried a new tactic, sending fake violation notices, hoping I'd sign something admitting guilt when that didn't work. She attempted to set traps, leaving items on my property boundary so she could claim I'd stolen them. Stan pulled out a folder thick with photographs and documents. I've been tracking Robert's movements for 3 days, every morning at Faubourg A. He sneaks out to meet someone at the old warehouse district last night. I followed him to an underground casino in Chinatown. The boy lost $40,000 in 90 minutes playing crypto poker when he couldn't pay. They took his watch, his car keys, and made him sign something. He showed me a grainy photo of Robert signing papers while 2 large men loomed over him. Here's the interesting part, Stan continued. Victoria has been selling off everything valuable. Last month, she auctioned her late husband's golf clubs, claimed they were stolen 2 weeks ago. His vintage wine collection mysteriously disappeared. She's bleeding money trying to cover for her son, but it's like trying to fill a bucket with no bottom. Each scheme was more desperate and poorly thought out than the last. I responded strategically. My lawyer sent a cease and desist letter regarding her harassment copied to every board member. I threw a massive barbecue for the whole neighborhood with a banner reading HOA friendly zone, except one lady, which got plenty of laughs. That's when I mentioned to Emily, I'm looking into a big real estate opportunity. Can't say much yet, but it could change everything. I also finally hired security, a gentle giant named Tiny Johnson, who came highly recommended, used to work security for 3 different HOAs until they all got dissolved, he told me with a grin. Something about misuse of funds and abuse of power. Funny how that keeps happening at 6'5", with marine tattoos visible under his shirt sleeves. Tiny was intimidating enough to deter any more direct confrontations. The real bombshell came on Friday. Stan called, barely able to contain his excitement. The company that owns Victoria's House Sterling Holdings, they're selling their entire portfolio, 15 houses in Willowbrook Heights, and they want a quick sale. We're talking about a massive opportunity here. My businessman instincts kicked in immediately. Buy them, I said, without hesitation. All of them, Stan gasped audibly. But that's millions. I smiled, though he couldn't see it through the phone. I know, and on Friday, Victoria's world changes forever. As I hung up, I thought about all the times Victoria had tried to make me feel like I didn't belong in her neighborhood. The irony was delicious. She was about to discover that not only did I belong here, but I was about to become the one person she couldn't afford to cross that weekend while Victoria was busy planning her next harassment campaign. I was in meetings with lawyers and bankers setting up the purchase through my holding company. I made sure to structure everything perfectly, legally but quietly. The seller was motivated, needing quick cash for their own business ventures, and my ability to pay cash made me the ideal buyer. By Friday afternoon, I owned 15 houses in Willowbrook Heights, including the one Victoria rented. What is Marcus planning? Well, she was about to find out that when you play games with someone who built their fortune from nothing, you better make sure you actually own the board. You're playing on 2 weeks of secret meetings, signing papers, and wire transfers felt like 2 years every time I saw Victoria strutting around the neighborhood like she owned the place. I had to suppress a smile. The irony was killing me in the best way possible. Finally, on a sunny Friday afternoon, I got the call that changed everything. "Congratulations, Mr. Rivera," my lawyer said. "You now own the entire Sterling Holdings portfolio, 15 properties in Willowbrook Heights, including 2447 Willow Lane." That was Victoria's address. I hung up the phone and poured myself a glass of wine, something I rarely did during the day, but this moment deserved celebration. I called Emily. "Over Monday's going to be fireworks," I told her, and her eyes lit up with anticipation. Meanwhile, Victoria was spiraling into increasingly desperate behavior. In 1 week alone, she sent 47 violation notices to my house. 47, they ranged from grass blade angle inconsistency to mailbox emanating suspicious aura. I'm not making this up. She actually wrote that my mailbox had a suspicious aura. Her Facebook live streams had become legendary in the neighborhood, but not in the way she intended. "This criminal is ruining our neighborhood values," she screeched at her phone camera one evening, but the comments were brutal. "Ma'am, you need therapy," wrote one viewer. "The only criminal here is whoever did your hair," added another. "Victoria, please stop, this is embarrassing," pleaded someone, who was apparently her cousin. He live-streamed disasters, became legendary in one memorable broadcast. Victoria tried to show evidence of my criminal activity, which turned out to be me carrying groceries into my house. "See how he's concealing those bags, probably drugs," she shrieked at her phone. A bag split open, revealing dangerous contraband like bread and organic bananas. Another time she live-streamed herself measuring my grass with a ruler during a thunderstorm. Lightning struck nearby, and she ran screaming back to her house, leaving her phone streaming video of the rain. For 45 minutes, the comments were brutal. "This is better than reality TV," someone wrote. "Someone get this woman a Netflix special," added another. The local news even did a segment called "When HOA Presidents Go Too Far," featuring Victoria's greatest hits. Things took a darker turn when Robert's problems became more visible. He showed up at the house one evening with a black eye, telling his mother he'd had a bicycle accident. Victoria's reaction was telling. She didn't question the obvious lie, just looked at a family photo on the mantel and muttered, "Everything I do is for you." Another $50, 000, disappeared from the HOA account that week, which Victoria announced at an emergency board meeting was due to a software glitch in the new accounting system. The board members exchanged knowing looks, but said nothing. They were all afraid of her, or at least they had been. That was about to change too. The neighborhood was starting to turn against Victoria in subtle but noticeable ways. People began putting up signs in their yards, "Pilgrim's property by order of new owner." Even though they owned their homes, it was a show of solidarity that must have driven Victoria crazy. Emily organized informal gatherings where neighbors discussed the future of our HOA and potential leadership changes. Someone even suggested loud enough for Victoria to hear from her yard, maybe it's time for a new president, someone who doesn't measure grass with a ruler. Tiny, my security guard, had become something of a local celebrity. He wore a shirt that said, "Security asked me about my HOA stories," and would regale anyone who asked with tales of power-hungry board members he'd seen fall from grace. The rebellion grew bolder. Mrs. Patterson started a Victoria bingo game where neighbors would mark off squares every time Victoria did something ridiculous. Mentions her dead husband's connections was the free space because it happened so often, calls the police for nothing. Was another popular square. George the veteran raised a flag that said "Free Willow Heights" under the American flag. When Victoria tried to find him, he cited 17 different federal statutes protecting his right to fly it. The young couple with the baby started leaving their stroller visible, 24/7, accumulating fines. They had no intention of paying. Even quiet Mr. Kim, who'd never said a word in 5 years, put up a sign in his yard. Grass height 2.1 and deal with it. Let me tell you about HOA. President number 2, Tiny would say to anyone who'd listen, thought she was untouchable. Until the FBI showed up. Turns out she'd been embezzling for years, buying herself jewelry with money meant for road repairs. Last I heard, she's making license plates in federal prison. Orange is definitely not her color. The neighbors would laugh nervously, glancing toward Victoria's house. The message was clear: no HOA president was above the law, and karma had a way of catching up. My strategic moves intensified. As Monday approached, I sent Victoria flowers with a card that read, 3 days until you meet your new landlord. Enjoy your weekend. The delivery guy later told me she'd thrown the vase against her door and screamed for 10 minutes. Emily leaked a compilation video titled "Watch Victoria Break Her Own Rules," showing the HOA president parking in handicapped spots, letting her dog poop on neighbors' lawns without cleaning it up, and violating at least a dozen of her own ridiculous regulations. The video went viral in local community groups. By Sunday night, neighbors were actively avoiding Victoria at the grocery store, turning down different aisles when they saw her coming. Monday morning arrived like Christmas at exactly 9:00 a.m. Victoria opened her mail to find the rent increase notice. Her scream echoed through the neighborhood. $8. 0. Several neighbors later told me they heard it from inside their houses with the windows closed. She immediately called the property management company, and I could hear her yelling from my backyard. I demand to meet this Mrs. Emmerich's Holdings owner. Now this is elderly, this is discrimination, this is elder abuse. The property manager, who I briefed on the situation, remained professionally calm. "Ma'am, you're 52, not 80. The owner is happy to meet with you. He's expecting you. Actually, Thursday, 2 p.m. I watched from my window as Victoria slammed her phone down so hard her patio table cracked. "I'll destroy whoever this is," she screamed, to no one in particular. They have no idea who they're messing with. My lawyers will eat them alive." She stomped back into her house, and I raised my wine glass in a mock toast. The best part was that she still had no idea it was me. All her focus was on fighting this mysterious new landlord who dared to raise her rent. She spent the next 3 days calling every lawyer in town, posting increasingly unhinged rants on social media and trying to rally the neighborhood to her cause, but the neighborhood had had enough. Her reign of terror was about to end, and Thursday couldn't come fast enough as I watched her pace her driveway like a caged animal, muttering about lawsuits and connections I couldn't help but think about that morning. She'd told me I didn't belong here. Well, Victoria, we're about to see who really belongs in this neighborhood and who's just been renting their throne. Victoria's descent into desperation was both pathetic and oddly satisfying to watch. By Tuesday, she'd Googled cheap lawyer near me so many times that ads for legal services were probably following her around the internet. I saw her at the bank trying to maintain her usual air of superiority while her hand shook. Signing a check for her new attorney, the teller who lived 3 streets over later told Emily that Victoria's credit card was declined twice before she finally wrote a check. Her Facebook posts about discrimination and elder abuse were getting fact-checked in real time by neighbors who'd had enough. "Victoria, you're 52, not a senior citizen." One comment read, "Also, market rate rent isn't discrimination, it's capitalism." The neighborhood's response to her meltdown was swift and brutal. Someone filmed her latest tantrum in the parking lot of the community center and posted it with the caption, "HOA Karen loses it, part 47. And it got 10,000 views in 2 hours. Local news picked it up, but not in the way Victoria hoped. Instead of a SOA story about a poor widow being victimized, they ran a segment on HOA overreach and how to fight back, featuring interviews with neighbors, detailing Victoria's years of harassment. She tried to do damage control with another live stream, but forgot to turn off comments. The result was a real-time roasting that would have made a comedian cry. By Wednesday, the Russians had stepped up their pressure on Robert. I was checking my mail when I saw 2 large men in tracksuits standing at Victoria's door. Robert answered, and even from across the street I could see him shaking. That's when something unexpected happened. I felt angry, not at Robert or even Victoria, but at these thugs threatening people in my neighborhood. My hands clenched into fists, and I took a step toward them before Tiny grabbed my shoulder. "Boss, let Karma handle this," he said, quietly. "Getting involved, but with the Russian mob ain't smart business." He was right, of course. I took a deep breath, unclenched my fists, and stepped back. "No," I told myself. "Don't be like them, be smarter." My strategic moves were reaching their climax. I sent another flower arrangement, this time with a card reading, "Countdown one day, your new landlord is excited to meet you." Emily had compiled her year of evidence into a presentation that would make any prosecutor weep with joy. She showed me a preview videos of Victoria's racist rants, illegal fines, admitting on camera to targeting specific neighbors, and even discussing
how to force people out of the neighborhood. She actually said, on recording, that she wanted to purify Willowbrook Heights. Emily said, shaking her head, "I can't wait to see her face when she realizes we have all this." Thursday morning, Victoria put
on her most expensive remaining outfit, a designer suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. She'd had her hair done, her nails manicured, and looked every inch the powerful HOA president she believed herself to be in her car. Victoria frantically dialed number after number. "Hello, Judge Morrison, it's Victoria Sterling Hayes. I need hello, hello," but the judge had hung up. She tried the mayor's office, but his secretary said he was in meetings all day. Even her hairdresser who'd listened to her rants for years, suddenly had no appointments available. She sat in her driveway practicing threats in the rearview mirror. "I'll destroy you," she hissed at her reflection. But her voice cracked. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking, and she had to reapply her lipstick 3 times. The armor was cracking, and she knew it, but underneath, the armor cracks were showing. She'd parked her Mercedes at a neighbor's house and was driving Robert's beat-up Toyota, hoping no one would notice. The neighbors noticed they noticed everything. As she drove away to her meeting with Destiny, several people came out to their yards to watch like they were seeing off a ship they knew was sailing toward an iceberg. At 1:30, Victoria arrived at the property management office. 30 minutes early, the secretary later told me she spent the entire time pacing the waiting room, muttering about lawsuits and connections. She kept saying her husband knew people. The secretary said I didn't have the heart to tell her that everyone her husband knew retired years ago. When 2 Ask arrived, Victoria straightened her jacket, put on her war face, and marched toward the office door. Like a general heading into battle, the secretary stammered, "The owner will see you now." And I could hear the nervousness in her voice. Even from inside the office, Victoria threw open the door with such force it banged against the wall. "I demand to speak to whoever's in charge of this criminal enterprise," she shouted before even looking to see who was in the room. Then her eyes focused on me. Sitting behind the desk in my best suit, hands folded calmly on the mahogany surface. The color drained from her face so fast I thought she might faint. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. "No," she whispered. Then louder, "No, this is impossible, you." The look of complete shock, the dawning realization that she'd been played, the understanding that the trash she'd tried to drive out now held her housing fate in his hands. It was better than I'd imagined for a long moment. We just stared at each other, and I let the silence stretch out, savoring it. "Who is the mysterious owner?" "Well, Victoria, you're looking at him, and we have so much to discuss about your lease." The silence in that office was deafening. Victoria stood, frozen in the doorway, her designer purse sliding off her shoulder and hitting the floor with a thud. She didn't even notice. "Hello, Victoria," I said, calmly, gesturing to the chair across from my desk. "Please have a seat. We need to discuss your
lease."
She stumbled forward like a zombie, collapsing into the chair while still staring at me in absolute horror. "This is impossible," she finally shrieked, her carefully styled hair already starting to come undone. "This is illegal. You can't be the
"Owner, you're just some nobody who—" She trailed off, probably realizing that calling your new landlord a nobody wasn't the best negotiation tactic. "Everything is perfectly legal, I assure you," I said, sliding the paperwork across the desk. "I purchased
the entire Sterling Holdings portfolio 2 weeks ago, cash purchase, all above board. Your rent is now $8,000 a month, due on the 1st. Oh, an interesting fact, I also own the homes of 5 of your HOA board members. Funny how things work out, isn't it?" Victoria's face went from pale to red to purple. In the span of seconds, she started hyperventilating, gasping for air like she'd just run a marathon. "I'll sue!" she screamed. "The mayor owes me. The governor knows my name. My husband built half this town. Your husband built a community center," I corrected gently. "A very nice one, dedicated to bringing people together. Ironic, considering how you've used your position to tear the community apart. But we're not here to talk about your husband. We're here to talk about your son stealing from the HOA that stopped her cold." "What are you talking about?" she whispered. But her eyes gave her away. She knew. Of course she knew accounting heirs don't usually transfer money to online gambling sites, I said.
especially not $200,000 worth. The door burst open and Robert stumbled in, looking worse than ever. His black eye had turned a sick yellow-green, and he was limping. "Mum, they're outside," he said frantically, not even noticing me at first. "The Russians."
They followed me here. Victoria's maternal instincts kicked in and she jumped up, putting herself between Robert and the door. That's when Robert finally saw me. His face went through the same color changes as his mother's. "Oh, God," he muttered. "Oh, God, you know everything, don't you?" "Let's discuss the missing money," I said, pulling out my phone. "Enough to buy a house, actually. Every withdrawal, every transfer to gambling sites. It's all here, documented, traced, ready for the district attorney." Robert tried one last desperate play. "He's lying. Mum, he's making it up. This is all part of his scheme to spit." Victoria slapped him. The sound echoed through the office like a gunshot. "Stop lying!"
And she screamed at her son. "For once in your worthless life, stop lying. You told me it was accounting software you promised me." Robert broke down completely, sobbing like a child. "I'm sorry, Mum. I thought I could win it back. I thought I could fix
it, but they kept raising the interest and I had to take more. And then I used the house as collateral, even though we don't own it. And what Victoria's scream probably registered on seismographs, you use my house as collateral. We don't even
own it." The full picture was becoming clear. Even to her, the Russians thought they had claim to a house worth millions when they found out Robert had lied about owning it. Well-broken bones would be the least of his problems. They said they'd kill me, Robert whimpered. "And then they said they'd come after you." Victoria turned back to me, and for the first time since I'd met her, I saw real fear in her eyes, not fear of losing power or status, but fear for her son's life. That's when we heard the
commotion outside, shouting in Russian, the secretary screaming, heavy footsteps approaching the door, flew open again, and two massive men in tracksuits filled the doorway. Sterling one barked, "Time's up, you pay now," or he stopped noticing me behind. The desk, his eyes narrowed. "Who are you?" Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. Tiny's text was short. "Boss, I'm in the lobby with Officer Thompson, say the word." I stood up, slowly straightening my tie. "Gentlemen, I think there's been a misunderstanding about some collateral." The Russians looked confused, then angry. "No misunderstanding, boy owes 300.
0 used houses collateral. We take house." The bigger Russian cracked his knuckles meaningfully. "You know what we do to liars in Moscow? We start with fingers one for each lie. Your boy told many lies," Robert whimpered, and Victoria actually stepped
forward, all 5'4" in of her, facing down men twice her size. "You'll have to go through me," she said. And for the first time I saw the mother underneath the monster. It was almost admirable. Almost. Part of me wanted to let them have Robert, to let Victoria feel what it was like to be powerless. But then I remembered my mother working 3 jobs, crying over bills. And I knew I couldn't let another mother suffer for her son's mistakes, no matter how much I despised her. I smiled coldly. Interesting, because I own that house and I certainly didn't authorize any liens against it. In
fact, using property you don't own as collateral is fraud, federal fraud. The lead Russian's face darkened. "You think you scare us, we are." Bang. Something hit the window hard, creating a spiderweb of cracks. Everyone jumped, and Victoria actually screamed.
Robert tried to hide behind his mother, who was trying to hide behind her purse. The Russians looked momentarily confused, which was when I played my ace. "Tiny," I said calmly into my phone, "please ask Officer Thompson to come up. We have some fraud to report." The Russians exchanged glances. Police meant questions. Questions meant attention. Attention was bad for business. "This isn't over." The lead one growled, but they were already backing toward the door. As they left, he pointed at Robert. "You can't hide forever, little man." After they left, Victoria collapsed back into the chair, sobbing for real now. No pretense, no drama, just a broken woman who'd watched her carefully constructed world crumble in minutes. "Don't hurt my baby," she whispered, looking up at me with mascara streaming down her face. "Please, he's all I have left. I'll do anything. I'll resign from the HOA. I'll apologize to everyone. I'll leave town. Just please don't let them hurt my baby." Robert was crying.
"To the tough guy act completely gone, Mom. There's something else," he said. Quietly, something worse. Victoria's face went white. "What did you do?" she whispered. Robert looked at the floor. "The Russians? They're not just after the gambling money I used."
"Your name to borrow more," another H100 read.
000, I forged your signature. The sound that came out of Victoria's throat wasn't quite human. It was the sound of someone discovering that rock bottom has a basement. And somewhere in that sound I heard something I hadn't expected to hear, the echo
Of my own mother crying over bills she couldn't pay while working 3 jobs to keep us afloat. Will Marcus save his worst enemy? The answer was becoming complicated by the second. The next morning, 300 people packed into the Sterling Community Centre. Phones ready to record what everyone knew would be the most dramatic HOA meeting in Willowbrook Heights history. The irony wasn't lost on anyone that we were gathering in the very building Victoria's husband had donated to promote community unity and harmony. According to the bronze plaque by the door, Victoria stood at the podium where she'd ruled from for 5 years, but she looked like a different person. No makeup, her platinum hair flat and unstyled, wearing a simple black dress instead of. Her usual powers suits her hands shook as she unfolded a piece of paper, and I noticed her touching her wedding ring repeatedly, like a talisman that had lost its power. "I stand before you today," she began, her voice barely above a whisper, "in the very room my husband built for unity, to confess that I have been the opposite of everything he believed." In someone in the back shouted, "Your husband would be ashamed." And Victoria flinched like she'd been slapped. Emily Rodriguez stood up immediately. "Let her speak," Emily said firmly. "We all deserve closure, and she deserves the chance to say what needs to be said." The room settled, and Victoria continued, her voice growing stronger, but laden with genuine remorse. "I abused my power. I discriminated against neighbors based on prejudice and fear. I turned what should have been a community service into a weapon of control. I violated the very rules I pretended to enforce. And worst of all, I allowed my son's problems to corrupt the financial integrity
of our HOA. She went through a litany of her sins, naming each person she'd wronged. "Dr. Rodriguez, I find you during the worst moment of your life, and I'm deeply sorry. Mr. and Mrs. Patterson, I tried to force you out because I didn't like your political
yard signs, Miss Washington. I called the police on your family barbecue because I was threatened by joy. I couldn't control the list, went on for 10 minutes. Each admission met with gasps or murmurs from the crowd. When she finally looked at me, tears were streaming down her face. And Mr. Rivera, I tried to drive you out because you reminded me that success doesn't look like what I was taught. It should look like you earned everything you have, while I've been living a lie, pretending to own things. I only rented, including my sense of superiority. That's when I stood up and made my way to the front. The crowd parted, whispering, everyone wondering what I would do. Would I gloat? Would I twist the knife? "Thank you, Victoria," I said, taking the microphone. "That took courage, and now I have something to share with all of you about the Russians who've been threatening the Sterling family. The room went silent. Some of you may have heard about the dangerous men who've been coming around. They were after Robert for gambling debts that he tried to cover by stealing from our HOA funds and fraudulently using his mother's house as collateral. Gasps rippled through the crowd, but that threat has been handled. I pulled out my phone and showed a
video. On the projection screen, it was security footage from the previous night, showing me meeting with the Russian mob boss in a neutral location. I bought their debt, my recorded voice said in the video. All of it. Robert works for me. Now he'll
be going to rehab, then he'll manage properties under strict supervision. You'll get your money, but through legitimate means. The mob boss in the video nodded slowly. You have balls, Mr. Rivera. We accept the boy is your problem now. The video ended, and I turned back to the stunned crowd. Robert Sterling turned himself in to the authorities. This morning, he'll serve community service instead of jail time, but only because he's agreed to testify about the gambling ring that's been targeting
vulnerable young people in our area. Victoria collapsed to her knees, sobbing uncontrollably. You saved us,
she whispered. After everything I did to you, you saved my son. I helped her to her feet, and for a moment the room was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Your husband built this community center, I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. James. Sterling believed in second chances. He believed in redemption. Maybe he wasn't wrong. The crowd was transfixed. As I continued, Victoria will be resigning as HOA president effective. Immediately, she'll complete 500 hours of community service. Not as punishment, but as penance. She'll be moving to a smaller property, one she can actually afford. And yes, she'll be working a regular job like the rest of us, but I added, raising a hand to quiet the murmurs, she'll also be staying in Willowbrook Heights, because running away doesn't fix anything. Facing the people you've wronged and making amends, that's how you really change. I turned to the board members. I called for a vote on new HOA leadership. The vote was unanimous. Johnson, Tiny Washington, was elected as the new HOA president. His first official act. No more measuring grass with rulers. He announced a thunderous applause and no more fines for being human. The crowd erupted in cheers. 6 months later, the video titled HOA Karen Gets Owned had over 5 million views. Someone had filmed Victoria working at Target wearing her name tag that read, Victoria, learning humility, when a customer recognized her and started filming, saying, "Is that the Victoria?" She looked directly at the camera and said, "Yes, it's me. And I'm sorry for everything. I'm trying to be better." The grace in that moment, the genuine humility, it changed the narrative. The comments section, usually a cesspool of hate, filled with messages about second chances and redemption. Robert, 90 Days Clean, had started a support group for gambling addicts, sharing his story to help others avoid his mistakes. I ran into Victoria at that same Target. Last week she was working the register, scanning items with practiced efficiency. When she saw me, she paused. "Did you find everything you needed today?" she asked. And there was something in her voice, a mix of gratitude and genuine inquiry. "Actually, yes," I replied, "especially justice. I left a $2,000 tip on the counter for Robert's continued treatment." I said, her eyes filled with tears. Why, she asked, after everything I did, why show mercy? I thought about it for a moment, then gave her the truth. I could have destroyed you completely. But what would that have proven? That I'm just as petty as you were. No, real power isn't about crushing your enemies. It's about knowing when to lift them up. Instead, as I left the store, I thought about the 47 HOAs nationwide that had reformed their policies after our story went viral. Change doesn't happen through revenge. It happens through example. Victoria taught me that in her own broken way, she showed me who I didn't want to become, and in the end, maybe that was worth more than all the fines she ever tried to collect. If you believe in second chances, if you think people can change, share this story. And remember, karma isn't always about punishment. Sometimes it's about redemption. The real victory isn't in defeating your enemies,